This Tuesday morning, and we are turning our attention to tomorrow night's World Cup qualifier between Serbia and the Republic of Ireland. Nathan Murphy and Stephen Doyle are with us. Good morning, lads.
Morning on.
Nathan, we've got another member of the Serbian camp, Stefan Mitrovic, this time coming out referring to Ireland and their British style, counter-attacking style. This is just par for the course, really, at this point. Everybody who comes out before an Ireland game says these sorts of things.
Well, I think if that's how they're going to set up, that may work in Ireland's favour because, well, traditionally that has been what Irish teams have done. That's what Ireland did the last time they went to Belgrade 3.5 years ago. Even with getting the early goal, Ireland sat back and tried to counter-attack. But the plan, from everything we've heard from Stephen Kenny and from what we saw in that game against Slovakia, is not just to be a counter-attacking team. It's that when they get hold of the ball, to actually try and control the game. So maybe if Serbia are looking at previous iterations of this Irish squad, they may be in for something of a surprise. But they're obviously very, very confident. Not built on a huge amount at senior level. They've had incredible success at underage level, winning underage World Cups, but they haven't been able to transfer that to the senior team at any stage. And Serbia have been the great underachievers of European football in the last 5-6 years. When you look at the talent that has been at their disposal, even when you look over the last decade, when they had the likes of Branislav Ivanovic, Alex Kolarov, Nemanja Matic, to never have qualified for European Championship, to have struggled to get to World Cups when they do get there, to have fallen flat on their face. This is a group and a country, I think, that needs to start stepping up at international level. So, yeah, they're able to talk the talk. They have a new manager. Let's see how they get on tomorrow night.
Stephen, is there any weird sense of confidence growing from an Irish perspective this week? That intangible thing sometimes that can happen before a big sporting event.
I was just thinking, wait till Serbia get a load of Kenny ball and they see it start knocking around the park. It's not going to be anything like the British football they're expecting. Yeah, it's funny, because as you know, the League of Ireland season started last weekend, and I was kind of comparing that kind of feeling that fans of domestic clubs will have just going into a new season, where that sense of anticipation, that sense of hope, before it all gets dashed within 90 minutes of your first match. But I would hope that hope and that we all have going into a new campaign, that can kind of be sustained for a little bit longer. As Leighton said, look, Serbia are the great underachievers. And I think if we go out there, the interesting thing, there's been a lot of talk about the stadium and the way there's going to be no fans, it won't be as intimidating. Nathan, were you at that last game in Belgrade? I was there, I remember. There wasn't a huge amount of supporters at it. There was only about 15,000 home supporters. So the atmosphere wasn't really too...
No, it was still quite... It was one of the most intimidating places I went to. I remember going to pick up my press pass in advance, and the atmosphere, as the queue grew longer, wasn't the most welcoming. But you're right. It was... you might remember the game was almost called off. The pitch was pretty much waterlogged, and there were doubts right up until about 10 minutes before kickoff as to whether or not it would actually go ahead. Maybe that contributed to it, but it certainly wasn't what the sort of welcome to hell going to Galatasaray back in the day style feeling that we all throw out there, the sort of stereotypical going to Eastern Europe. It's going to be intimidating. The players are used to playing in front of empty stadiums at this stage. Yes, it probably is an advantage. If by the time we come back in September and we can have a full Aviva stadium, it would certainly be an advantage. But I don't think it was going to be something that would strike fear into the hearts of the players going to Belgrade.
And as well, Nathan, I've been saying this for years, but and I think Dan McDonald might have said it to Joe last night on the radio, that I don't think Luxembourg are going to be the pushovers that many people think they will be. They are a progressive footballing nation. They were quite unlucky actually not to get promoted in their UEFA Nations League. They had a bit of a disaster against Cyprus in the kind of key game that would have got them up. They got a man sent off pretty early on. So I think that Luxembourg game might be a little bit tougher than people expect as well.
Yeah, God, you've actually been banging the Luxembourg drum for a few years, Stephen. So this has been coming. You have been with us this morning quite sometimes. You both picked your starting 11s. I know you were on with us, a month ago, picking the starting 11s as well. This is obviously going to be far more accurate. You both gone for the same goalkeeper and the same back four. And the question mark really is around that centre-back partnership. I think the consensus now seems to be that Kieran Clark is definitely going to start. And you both agreed that Darragh O'Shea is the man to start beside him. Why not Shane Duffy, Nathan? I know the answer to that is quite obvious, but did you consider the fact that Duffy maybe can park his Celtic form on an international stage?
And I think he can park the Celtic form on the international stage. And also, if he does start, there'll be a big difference from back in the autumn, because Seamus Coleman, in all likelihood, will be alongside him at right back, who offers a different sort of protection than when Matt Doherty is there. I wouldn't be shocked if he stuck with Shane Duffy. He did make a point, Stephen Kenny, at the squad announcement of that Shane Duffy has never let his country down. Yes, he's had a difficult time, but in a green jersey, he feels he is still delivering. And the fact that Randolph isn't there, the fact that John Egan is gone, maybe he feels that going with Darragh O'Shea might just be a little bit too much inexperience in the side. But Kieran Clark has been around for a decade at this stage. It's a real shame that Kieran Clark has only 34 caps. I don't feel that John Egan's loss is a catastrophic loss at the heart of the defence. I think Kieran Clark, at his best, fully fit, is Ireland's best centre-half. So it's brilliant that he's coming in actually for once with a run of games. He actually played a lot of games in the last World Cup qualifying campaign. The last two times himself and Shane Duffy started together at centre-back were the 4-1 defeat in Wales and the 5-1 defeat in Denmark. Now, I'm not sure if that'll play into Stephen Kenny's thoughts at all. It's hard to see how Duffy, having played little or no football, with his confidence at an all-time low, can come in and just quickly turn that around. But he is very, very passionate about playing for Ireland, and maybe he can show enough in training to Stephen Kenny to suggest, you know what, an experienced duo of Clark and Duffy is better than throwing Darragh O'Shea in there. But I think Darragh O'Shea will get there. We went for the goalkeeper because Stephen Kenny said last week that if Caoimhín Kelleher didn't make it, Mark Travers is next in line. And I think Coleman at this stage is nailed on. It's incredible he hasn't played since that night he was sent off in Switzerland. He will be a man with a point to prove, I think, individually, but also collectively, because he takes that role as captain very seriously. I think he takes to heart the criticism of the team. He takes that as a reflection on himself, that he is the captain of this group that are being roundly slated again and again. So I'd expect a big performance from Coleman tomorrow night.
Listen, the more I look at that, the more I look at Coleman, O'Shea, Clark, Stevens, and the way you talk up Kieran Clark there, it doesn't remove the possibility at all of Ireland coming away with a clean sheet. Like, I mean, it does leave that hope. It isn't the worst back four in the world whatsoever. Like, the one question I would have, Steve-O, just on Shane Duffy, having watched a lot of Celtic this season, how different an experience is it for Shane Duffy playing in that back four, a team going after titles in Scotland, to what it would be saying playing in the back four for a Stephen Kenny Ireland team?
Well, I suppose I would be kind of agreeing with Nathan there, and I do think that there's a good chance Kenny will go for Duffy, despite the fact that we might fancy Clark and O'Shea. But the problems with Celtic are run deep. You know, it's not just their defensive issues weren't just down to one bad defender. There was systematic failures there in that Celtic team, and I wouldn't be kind of pinning it all on Shane Duffy, although we do know he's had his own problems himself with form and that kind of thing. And perhaps, you know, Stephen Kenny's putting his arm around him, as we know he likes to do with some players, and, you know, perhaps just coaxing a really good performance out of Shane Duffy. I wouldn't say that's beyond the realms of possibility. And I wouldn't be exactly too downhearted if Duffy and Clark were picked together. But I just keep thinking back to Darragh O'Shea's performances against Liverpool and Manchester City in the Premier League this season, the two 1-1 draws away from home. And just how steady and assured and calm Darragh O'Shea looked. He didn't look like a guy who was just starting out his Premier League career. He looked, you know, an old head on young shoulders. And I think with somebody like Seamus Coleman and Kieran Clark beside him, and Enda Stevens has a fair bit of experience himself, that he should be okay in that back four. I also think, you know, Nathan was talking about Kieran Clark there, even just looking at his goals as well. Like, he's just approaching 200 Premier League appearances. I think he's 3 short. He's got 15 Premier League goals. It's a decent return for a centre half and a guy who has started, you know, so many of those 197 appearances. So that's something as well that we could be looking at for set pieces. And we know Shane Duffy is good for goal at set pieces as well. And as Nathan said, just having that experience of Seamus Coleman coming back, I just think it's so big. You know, there was that video going around the social media the other day of him meeting Gavin Bazunu in the team hotel, and just getting there, having a chat with him. And, you know, it's just so important, I think, having Seamus Coleman, not just in the team for his ability, which is, I think he's been back to his best form. I think it took him a while after he came back from that broken leg, but we've seen Seamus Coleman this season back to his best on the pitch. But I think as well, just his captaincy, his leadership that he has off the pitch is going to be really crucial as well. I think Seamus Coleman is first name on the team sheet, and then after that you can see where you go from there. But I would like to see O'Shea playing. I don't think this game is beyond him. And also, I think Dan McDonald made a good point to Joe last night as well about Mark Travers. We've seen him with Bournemouth getting thrown into a big Premier League game against Tottenham Hotspur, his debut, and he kept a clean sheet in that match as well. So if we can pull a performance like that out of him again tomorrow night, we'll be doing okay.
Listen, and Stephen Kenny won't see Darragh O'Shea as a massive risk. He knows his game inside out. He had a great partnership with Conor Masterson at the 21s. He is, from everything you hear of Darragh O'Shea, a real leader. He's got an old head and young shoulders. So having Coleman alongside him, it would be just if he looks at it and thinks, away in Belgrade, even at an empty stadium, do I want that bit of experience in Duffy? But I think he will more than likely go with O'Shea.
You've both gone for Matt Doherty then in the starting team as well. Is that because of the injuries, Nathan, or is Matt Doherty in Ireland's best 11 regardless?
I think Matt Doherty is one of Ireland's best 11 players. The difficulty is where do you fit him into the side? But I think away from home, it could work perfectly because Doherty is at his very best when he's making those late runs into the area at the back post. We know that he is a good passer of the ball. We know his close control is excellent when he's picking it up out in the wings. The criticism of Matt Doherty is when he's on the back foot. And regardless of changing system styles, any of that, Ireland are going to find themselves on the back foot at times in this game. So could you fully trust Matt Doherty at right back compared to Seamus Coleman? I don't think so. So that's why Coleman is one of the first names on the team sheet. I just think you have to give Doherty another opportunity. I was in Gibraltar, I think it was this day 2 years ago when Ireland played Gibraltar, and Coleman and Doherty played in ridiculously windy conditions, and it was written off. And it was one of the big mistakes Mick McCarthy made because it wasn't actually that bad. Doherty and Coleman. And I think he gives you a good attacking outlet while being able to double up defensively as well with Seamus Coleman. So I think it's a perfect game to play Matt Doherty on that right-hand side. If everyone is available, I'm not so sure, but I'm more than happy to have Matt Doherty playing in that team because I think there's no question he's one of Ireland's best players. It's just where do you find a spot from?
I think as well there was a bit of concern about Doherty as well in regards to his defence. Well, I suppose his defensive frailties maybe exposed a little bit in that London derby a couple of weeks ago. He was skinned a couple of times by Kieran Tierney and Smith Rowe as well down that left-hand side. But I think as well as being shades of the old Matt Doherty, just from an attacking sense with Tottenham linking up well with Gareth Bale, down that right-hand side. And if you can get him, like he can come in diagonally through the box or also around by the byline, and he can really give defenders something to think about. So, I think you got to get him into that team somehow.
We just had Nathan's team up on screen. We might get that back up again so people at home can see it. So in front of that back four that we've mentioned, you've got Doherty on the right, but that's in front of a midfield three of Knight, Hendrick and Brown. So up front, you're going for Doherty, Robinson and Connolly. We'll come to your team in just a moment, Stephen, but I just want to get your opinion on Jeff Hendrick first, Nathan. Why is he a starter for you?
Because I think he hasn't done anything wrong since Stephen Kenny took over, and he is still a player of huge experience in a side that is lacking a little bit of experience, particularly in and around that midfield area. He comes in for an enormous amount of stick from Irish supporters, regardless, it feels, of how he plays, because that night against Slovakia, I thought he was excellent. There were other games during the Nations League when he played really well, yet you look online and he's getting absolutely hammered. He was put on a sort of pedestal after Euro 2016 by all of us that, let's be honest, he hasn't quite hit. But I think people put him on too high a pedestal for what they expected. His link-up play between midfield and attack, almost all the chances that Ireland created when he played came through Jeff Hendrick, and his ability to drive forward has obviously dropped out of the Newcastle team, got a half at the weekend. But because of the absences of Conor Howerton, I think if Howerton was there, maybe Hendrick may have ended up falling out of the side. But with Howerton gone, I think Hendrick will start. And he's any amount of options. It was very difficult to pick, particularly in midfield three. It's just, from a Stephen Kenny point of view, when he does his press conference in an hour or two's time, when he's talking about his options, they're not the sort of good headache that managers often resort to with a cliche. It's not as though he's sitting there going, well, Callum Robinson has scored 10 Premier League goals and Aaron Connolly has scored 10 Premier League goals. Which of them am I going to pick? He's looking at it as which is the lesser of two evils of Callum Robinson hasn't played in 2 months and Aaron Connolly has come in with an injury. So there are lots of players there of similar caliber in similar situations at club level, and he's just trying to get the right mix. There's very few players who've come into this. Unfortunately, Conor Howerton was number one on that list, who've come in with their hand up saying, you have got to start me because of my club form. So I think Hendrick will play, and then I don't think you can play Knight and Malumbi together. just that bit of inexperience and probably both a little bit too rash at times. So I wouldn't be surprised if Cullen sits in that holding midfield role that James McCarthy played over in Slovakia. And again, whether it's Knight or Malumbi, or does he find a place in there for Alan Brown, I don't think it makes a huge difference.
Well, you've gone for Cullen over Hendrick, Steve-O, but I just want to mention one thing from your team, because we're almost out of time. You've gone for Shane Long up front. I think we have your team as well here. Nathan, you've gone for Callum Robinson in that 9 role. So why Shane Long, Stephen?
Yeah, well, see, my reasoning was, I had Cullen and Knight plays the holding midfielders and Alan Brown just ahead of them. And I just think all of those players are playing for their clubs. They're all in form, so reward them for that. But I just think when you have a couple of players like that who are maybe lacking the amount of international experience that some of the other players on the pitch are, I thought that perhaps if you get somebody like Shane Long, who has a lot of international experience, and also we know what Shane Long is good at, like he's obviously good on counter-attacks, he's got good pace, but I think he's strong, he's able to hold the ball up well, and then he can bring in players like the likes of Aaron Connolly, Matt Doherty, Alan Brown, who are around, and we know Alan Brown can get a goal or a shot away from the edge of the box. So that's why I went for Long, and he's playing at Bournemouth again. Look, he's got a couple of goals, and also hugely prolific, as it never really is with Shane Long over the last few weeks. But I just think for his ability to hold the ball, which I think could be important when you've got a couple of nippy midfielders and strikers around, like the likes of Connolly, Knight, Brown, and Matt Doherty as well.
Stephen, what's going to happen?
I don't think Serbia are, like, they've got some really good players. I'd be worried about the 2 Eintracht Frankfurt guys if they start. Kostic, Rebic, I think they're really good. Dusan Tadic, obviously from Ajax. They got really good players in the attack. They're not really strong at the back, though. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
Nathan?
The easiest prediction in world sport is when the Republic of Ireland are playing away from home, 1-1 is always the scoreline to go for, and I find it hard to disagree. I think Stephen Kenny touched on it. It's an 8-game group, which means if you can start fast, if Ireland could somehow come away with a win, Serbia are the wild card in this. We know Portugal no likely are going to win the group. If you could win in Serbia, they're playing Portugal on Saturday. They've got Azerbaijan then next Wednesday. They've got games coming quick and fast. That actually a slow start for Serbia could be massively beneficial for Ireland. But I'm going to go for a 1-1.
So you're saying that we're actually going to score a goal, Nathan. Who's going to get it?
Callum Robinson. I've Callum Robinson in there because I'm putting a lot of stock in the Slovakia game, and I thought he was brilliant that night. I love watching him play. I can't believe with West Brom, the struggles they've gone through, he hasn't got more game time. Got a great attitude, and I'm going to go for a Callum Robinson goal.
Stephen?
I'm going to go for Aaron Connolly. I think
right.
I think he's got to answer some critics for what's gone on over the last couple of weeks. Maybe show his boss Graham Potter that he's still able to stick it in the back of the net.
Let's remember the most likely scenario is that Kieran Clark gets injured after 4 minutes. Shane Duffy comes on and scores with an 89th header.
You have heard it here first. The Republic of Ireland are going to draw a game 1-1. Breaking news. Nathan Murphy, Stephen Doyle, thanks a million.
Cheers on.
Thanks on.
It is 31 minutes past 9 on this Tuesday morning. You've been watching or listening to OTB AM. It's an association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead.